Good morning. It looks like we have several that are joining us, and I know several will continue to join here over the next couple of minutes. And we are just so glad that you all have chosen to spend an hour with us today. As many of you know, my name is Mitzi Holland, and I am the director of the Kentucky Advising Academy. And we have a great episode in store for you all today. We're going to be talking about making informed decisions on paying for college. We are joined today by our regional coordinators as well as special guests, Mr. Bryson Davis, Miss Lindsay Driscoll, Miss Runan Evans, and Miss Audrey Price. And they will introduce themselves here in a little bit. But they're going to be sharing lots of great information with you. And again, we are just so happy that you have decided to spend an hour with us. And I am going to turn it over to Cheryl, our regional coordinator, who will lead the webinar. And as always, if you have questions throughout, drop them in the chat, but Cheryl will talk a little bit more about that. So thank you all.
Well, as Mitzi said, hello everyone and good morning. As we give some time for people to join in and be admitted, I'd like to get to know a little bit about who's joining us today. So if you could please introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to hear your name, your organization, and title. And today's get to know you question might be a little controversial, I guess, depending upon who you are, and that's when does fall start? So are you one of the people where it starts in August, the minute Starbucks released that pumpkin spice latte? Is it, September 23rd, the date that like the weather says fall starts? Or I'm kind of an after Labor Day person is when kind of fall starts for me, the minute the last summer hurrah is over. But I just thought that would be a fun one. Since everybody, I know most people I know are very much ready for the fall weather.
I'll go first. Is that okay? Okay. I am Audrey Price. I'm at Lindsay Wilson College and I am the Director of Financial Aid. And I believe fall starts when the weather changes. That first cool day, I'm like, oh, fall is here.
Weather changes. We have some in the chat. We have a couple for like Team PSL when that releases at Starbucks. That's their fall. When it's cool enough to wear jeans and not sweat to death. That's a good one. Sweater weather. All right. Well, we're gonna keep going. Thank you guys for popping that in the chat, and thank you, Audrey. So on our agenda for today, we're going to have a brief introduction to the Kentucky Advising Academy, and then we'll begin our panel discussion, kind of a different format today with today's guests. So at any time, if you have questions, as Mitzi said, please just pop that into the chat, and we'll share those questions before we wrap up or during our Q&A portion. And if we don't get them all answered during the webinar, then we'll be sure to reach back out to you with those answers. So we're going to wrap up after our panel discussion on ways to stay connected with KAA and our evaluation for feedback, as well as how you'll get ELA credit for today's participation. So to introduce KAA just a little bit, in case anyone joining us today is not familiar with our work, our purpose of the Kentucky Advising Academy is to provide support to Kentucky educators in providing students equitable access to post-secondary advising for successful transitions from secondary to their desired careers. And the KAA does that by providing comprehensive professional learning sessions, one of which we just had yesterday in Lexington at BCTC, and online resources such as the webinar today for networking and opportunities centered around post-secondary advising. We have multiple ways that practitioners can choose to be involved. So monthly, we offer our Well-Advised podcast. It's a brief podcast on timely post-secondary topics. And that's kind of just a quick bite you can get whenever you have the time to listen that keeps you up to date on some post-secondary happenings. We also have our monthly webinar. Usually has a similar topic as our podcast. And that's kind of what you're joining us here for today. but they give practitioners a chance to convene in kind of whatever best way suits them. We also have our regionally held professional learning events, as I just mentioned, and this falls is using data to support post-secondary advising. So yesterday we had BCTC, and we have one more next week at Sky CTC in Bowling Green. And if anyone would still like to register for that, you'll get information on that at the end of today. And we also have a comprehensive online advising toolkit, and that shares frequently needed informational tips and spotlighting certain advising practices throughout the Commonwealth and state. So if you've joined us for a webinar before or are taking advantage of all that we have already, we thank you so much. And if you're not, we're going to share at the end how to be involved in all of that, so you can get connected with us as well. So to accomplish all that we offer, we have our program director and regional advising coordinators, which help us execute this structure and the work of the Kentucky Advising Academy. And as I said, we'd love you to join us for any and all of these opportunities. And so we'll let you know how to stay connected to those. With that, I'd like to introduce our VIPs in the webinar with us today. We have Bryson Davis, Director at WKU's Department of Student Financial Assistance; Lindsay Driscoll, Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs in Admissions and Financial Aid at Jefferson Community and Technical College; Runan Evans, Associate Dean of Financial Aid at Bluegrass Community Technical College; and Audrey Price, Director of Financial Aid at Lindsay Wilson College, who you heard from a little bit earlier. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm going to pop us out of our slideshow and let you guys take it away with introducing yourselves. Bryson, would you mind starting us?
Sure, yeah. I'm Bryson Davis. I'm the Director of Student Financial Assistance here at Western Kentucky University, as you all already know. Been in financial aid right at 15 years and have been the director here at WKU almost 5 years. And for me, to answer the question of the day, when does fall start? When the leaves start changing. When I start seeing that color outside, that's when fall starts for me.
And whoever would like to go next can go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Renan Evans. I'm the Associate Dean of Financial Aid at Bluegrass Community and Technical College. This marks my 33rd year in financial aid as a full-time employee, and 36 because I started out as a federal work study student in financial aid. For me, fall starts when I can wear my riding boots.
Oh, yeah.
I can go. My name is Lindsay Driscoll, and I am an Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs with Financial Aid and Admissions at Jefferson Community and Technical College. I've been in financial aid for almost 20 years. I started in 2004, and I have worked at several different colleges across the state, I have lots of experiences with that. I've been at Jefferson Community and Technical College for a little over 4 years. And I think fall starts when I can start wearing my sweaters and being cozy.
I already introduced myself because I was out of line, but I'm Audrey Price from Lindsay Wilson College. I have been in higher education for over 10 years, but financial aid world, 6 years at KAA as an outreach counselor, and then 2 years at Campbellsville University as assistant director. And here I am less than a year at Lindsay Wilson College as director. And again, fall starts whenever the weather starts to change, temperatures drop.
It seems to be a common one, when I can wear the warm, cozy clothing and it's actually cold enough to do so. Well, thank you guys for those introductions. We're going to jump right in to our questions. So today is, as for anyone who registered saw, our topic is making informed decisions on paying for college. And we have our financial aid experts in the room with us today. So we're going to be asking some questions on how our advisors can best serve students when it comes to making those important financial aid decisions, and how do they get the most bang for their buck when it comes to a post-secondary option. So Audrey, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you. And our first question is, what is your advice for counselors and students to not leave money on the table when it comes to financial aid and scholarships for post-secondary education?
Sure. There's lots of things that advisors and counselors can help students with. Seeking local scholarships would be one thing that I think a lot of people forget to do. And typically those local scholarships are advertised in your community starting in the spring. And so, you know, the college admissions is in the fall, and the application days are in the fall, and the FAFSA is typically filled out in the fall. And so I think a lot of people forget about those local scholarship application deadlines that come out in the spring semester, spring months, as well as there are employers that give scholarships. So I think everybody should be encouraged to check with their parents' employers, or if a student is employed, check with their employer to see if there's scholarships as well. And of course, institutional aid. Depending on a student's program, or you know, if they're a first generation college student, if they're a minority student, if they're going into a program, let's just say nursing. Most colleges have departmental scholarships. Sometimes they don't give those out to freshmen, and sometimes they do. But my recommendation is seek out the guidance from the high school, the college counselors, the admissions counselors, and then also take a trip while you're on campus and visit financial aid. There's a lot of endowed funds, which is a fancy word for donations at colleges, and there's criteria that these donors set forth, and if you are that person that meets that criteria, then you could also receive some of that endowed funds. So always ask, pay attention to deadlines, and just don't forget those search engines as well. There are national search engines. I know KAA.com has a great one, and we've had students land scholarships from that search engine this year. So I would always encourage that, but just make sure your students know not to ever provide their social. Don't make a payment to search for scholarships. But yeah, don't leave any money on the table if you can.
Lindsay or Renan, would you like to add anything to that? I think you're muted.
Yeah, even though you may not have made your choice yet, as Audrey pointed out, if you're thinking of several schools, apply for scholarships at all schools that you think you may want to attend, because decisions typically are not made until around the first of the year in most cases. I know for our school, we start making decisions around February at BCTC, but it's better for you to undo than to try to do later with it when it comes to financial aid. And also, once you have made that college choice, please notify the other schools you have decided not to attend if you've been offered an aid package. Encourage students to just be courteous, let the school know, thank you, but I'm not going to accept this scholarship, so that we can award those to other students.
I was just going to say, I kind of agree with everything Audrey said, but also would add in there to check with the places that you work, or check for some, especially in Louisville and probably Lexington too, there's a lot of employers that will provide 100% tuition benefits to students. And around here we have UPS, Amazon, McDonald's actually does. And so there's quite a few that, you know, you may be working part-time somewhere, and there's an opportunity for them to help with, if not fully, partially covering part of your education. So look into those benefits as well.
And that's a really good point, even that Audrey made, of there's so much with like college and post-secondary planning that happens in the fall, and then the spring really is like a ripe opportunity for like hunting and finding those scholarships and reaching out to those people. Bryson, do you have any final thoughts on this question, or is it just ditto?
Well, ditto, but one thing that that Audrey brought up was, you know, referencing scholarships and those external searches, and making sure that you're not giving out information maybe that you don't need to. One resource that folks can direct students to is through Nelnet. They actually have a great portal out there now where that they have several thousand scholarships that are being offered, and they've all been vetted. So the way that I explain it to our families here at WKU is that when they're out there looking at those, they don't have to worry about applying for that and then having their identity stolen. So that's a good safe place to go look for several opportunities that are nationwide, national opportunities for them.
Yeah, and that's a big one. Most scholarship opportunities will not ask super sketchy questions or for super private information or want you to pay them. So for our next question, I'd like to start with Hernan. What do you see students missing out on most when it comes to financial aid?
Work opportunities. Work is not a bad four-letter word in college. Students can go to work and attend classes, particularly with the federal work study program. They are actually, for us, most of our jobs are on campus. So the students are working around their schedule, and they can go to class, come back to work, and do those things. And also add that is great on-the-job training and opportunities for students. I support work study because I'm a product of federal work study. I started working in the financial aid office as a student at the University of Louisville, and hey, it landed me a career. So I would encourage students and families and parents especially. Like if you tell the parent it's okay for your student to go to work and earn a little money, this is always great for the parent because the student is out of their pocket a little bit. And they are learning some on-the-job training. They can work with their faculty, particularly at research institutions. A lot of research labs may need student workers to help do things, and it's a great way for them to get involved with their faculty members and get a little leg up sometime in some of their classwork.
Would anybody else like to add on to that question? What do you see students missing out on most?
I'll add, a lot of times students land in my office whenever they don't have the gap covered between aid and the cost. And so the first thing I do is go straight to that FAFSA data and see if anything looks a little off. And a lot of the time it's the parents' recorded assets such as their homes or their cars or their boats, and those things don't get reported. And so it is generally a mistake that they have made on the FAFSA that throws them out of the Pell Grant range or even the KTG range, which is that Kentucky tuition grant here in the state for private colleges. So, not all the time can we go in and make a correction to the FAFSA, but a lot of times people fill out the FAFSA in such a hurry that they don't read what is supposed to be on there or what is not supposed to be on there. And so a few times a month, I feel like we are able to reevaluate the FAFSA, make those changes, and then that sometimes gets the student more either federal, state, or institutional aid. So that's kind of on the back end, but the message to you all is explain to your students how important it is to read that FAFSA, and especially whenever you start filling out the 24-25 FAFSA, read the data, read the prompts, because the FAFSA is changing, and you will all probably know that by now. But what was is going to be different than what will be as far as on the FAFSA. So.
And I would just add on to that to say a lot of times the students I see miss out on the FAFSA altogether because they think they do not qualify for anything. And so they don't fill it out. And I would encourage people to apply, encourage students to apply, because even if they don't qualify for a federal aid program, they might qualify for a state aid program that requires the FAFSA. Here at the community colleges, a lot of students are eligible for Work Ready, which requires the FAFSA. Even if they don't necessarily have aid, a grant, they might be eligible for some money. Or endowed scholarships, there are some that require a FAFSA to be completed. So there's lots of opportunities that may not be a Pell Grant that you could become eligible for by filing a FAFSA, and it doesn't hurt to do the work and put it in and find out what could be out there for you. It may be required for the institution to even review you for some forms of institutional aid. So I would encourage people not to just ignore the FAFSA because they think they aren't eligible.
Do you see that happening as much, Bryson, with the students who are just kind of not taking advantage of it?
Yeah, I think that's an element that we all deal with, is that pocket of students that just don't think that they're going to qualify for anything. And one thing that I always point out to students is that a lot of schools, even to kind of go back to what Renan was talking about, work study, a lot of our schools will require a student to have completed a FAFSA to be eligible for student employment. Even if they don't qualify for work study, if they're just going to be a general student employee paid through university funds, the university wants that student to have a FAFSA on file to make sure that they're maximizing those resources. So that's one thing that, you know, that people don't normally think about being tied with that. And then we're seeing more and more scholarship committees, the entities that are making those decisions on scholarships, that if they see that a student doesn't have a FAFSA on file, or if they ask for financial need, basically, to rank these students, and they will tell us, don't include anyone that doesn't have a FAFSA because we assume that they are planning to pay because they can pay. So students may be missing out on some scholarship opportunities by just not filling out that FAFSA, even though they're not directly tied to it. So there's a lot of indirect relationship there that, you know, that can actually hurt that student. But the one thing that I probably see more than anything are deadlines. Students just, they don't seem to keep up with and catch on to the fact that there are deadlines for a lot of these scholarship opportunities and different programs and so forth. So encouraging students to be vigilant of those deadlines and making sure that, you know, that they're creating a calendar and kind of keeping up with things throughout the year, that will help them probably more than anything, because a lot of our students, it seems, wait until they get to the end of the road. It's time to start the semester, and then they want to be concerned with how they're going to pay that bill. So, you know, thinking through those things and trying to be a little bit more vigilant of deadlines and doing things as early as possible. That seems to be one of the catching points anymore.
And that commentary about deadlines is something that we've heard even from other, you know, higher ed professionals at many different schools in Kentucky. And it kind of leads to our next question, which, Lindsay, I'd like to start with you, but if everyone could respond to this one, because we have so many different perspectives. How can counselors best assist students and advise them through the financial aid process? So while counselors still have the student before they kind of get to that summer transition period.
That was a perfect segue into the deadline conversation, because I think one of the most important things that the counselors can do to help their students is to keep up to date on the deadlines for, if nothing else, the local schools, the local colleges, what their scholarship deadlines might be, if they have a early priority FAFSA deadline, what that could be, and then be really vigilant in getting those deadlines communicated with the students. That is a huge part of it. I think also, and I know I kind of touched on this in the question before, but being familiar enough with the FAFSA that you can encourage it and at least know where they can go to fill it out, know the websites, know when it's available for which years. Typically it's October 1st, but this year it's going to be delayed for 24-25 until sometime in December. To be aware of that information is helpful for your students. The students are probably feeling incredibly overwhelmed with the different deadlines and with the different steps. And so on top of knowing some of that information, to be encouraging and let them know that they can do this and that they will help them through the process. One other thing I would add is, in regards to deadlines, is also to be checking on KIA for students who are a Kentucky student going to a Kentucky college, so they can be aware of any priority deadlines, maybe when it comes to programs like Work Ready, or there might be something out there about filing a FAFSA as quickly as possible for CAP grant eligibility or KTG eligibility. So just be as aware as you can with FAFSA availability, state grants, and scholarship deadlines, I think is really important. And then just encouragement. Encourage those students, be there for them as they go through that process.
I'll add, a lot of students don't love checking emails, but that is the way that we communicate with students. And so whatever email is on that FAFSA is financial aid office's main email address that we use. If they've applied for admission, they may provide a personal email account. But you know, whatever email they're using, try to have it consecutive on all applications for every college, for the FAFSA. Don't let the parent put their email on the FAFSA if it says the student email. That way it's just consistent, and just encourage your students. Please don't use your high school email address on that FAFSA or on the FSAID, because they cannot access that after they graduate high school, from my experience, and they get stuck when they're a sophomore trying to fill out the FAFSA or complete other processes. So just please encourage your students, have a class, email 101, how to set up a free email on Outlook or Gmail. But that's another thing that you all can help the students get comfortable with email, because that's something that colleges, professors, offices at the colleges use to communicate with students.
I would advise counselors to get a little familiar with the post-application process. Sometimes students get lost with the follow-up to the FAFSA, is what I would like to say. They may be selected for verification. There may be something that was left out. Their application could have been rejected altogether. But if you could familiarize yourself with that, and again, as Audrey said, go to the email, because that's how the school is going to communicate to them that something's missing or we may need something else from you. And if they've listed several schools, they're going to have to do that at all schools. Whatever one school may need, the other school is going to need it too. I can't get into Western's files to see what the student turned in there. And Western's process could be different than Lindsay Wilson's process. And I can guarantee you it is, so just make sure that the student, you are aware, and the student is aware that, hey, I'm going to need to follow up and do this post experience with the FAFSA, and it could be different at every school. Cheryl, you're muted.
Like I wasn't a little bit ago. Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that the email is a huge one, and keeping up with those emails, and especially that I used to be, in a past life, a college success coach, and I cannot tell you how many times I was on the phone helping the student through the process of like calling, the main line to get a hold of somebody who could help them change their email address because they had no longer had access to the school one and they were sophomores. So that's a big one. So for our next question, since we mentioned the FAFSA and FSAID, this is another great segue. Bryson, I'd like to start with you. Do you have any advice on how advisors can guide students and parents who don't want to complete a FAFSA due to a misconception for not qualifying for aid?
Yeah, we've already talked about a few things, I think, in some of the other points that we've made. So, remembering that work study is sometimes tied to that FAFSA, student employment, so forth. Also remembering that, as you're applying for scholarships, even though they're not tied to the FAFSA, some entities are using some of that information to make those decisions, as we said before. But one of the bigger things that's coming in, and we've kind of alluded to some of the changes with the deadline, or the FAFSA actually opening, not in October, but in December this year, is with the implementation of Better FAFSA, Better Future for the 24-25 academic year. Need calculations and methodology used to determine what aid a student may qualify for is changing. So I'm hearing from other schools that, there are ways that we're looking to try to determine what effects it's going to have on our student populations. And I'm hearing from folks that are saying that, they're expecting an increase of 10% all the way up to 30% of their student populations in some cases that may be Pell eligible compared to in the past. So that's additional Pell eligibility increases. So that's free funding out there for those students from the federal government. So the main point I think at this time that should be made to parents and students is that even if you don't think that your student's going to qualify, or even if you've had a sibling, the student may have had a sibling that's gone through school and they didn't qualify for anything other than Stafford loans, this is not the year to make those assumptions. So going into 24-25, we need to make sure that we're encouraging our students to complete the FAFSA, regardless of what you think you're going to qualify for, because these are uncharted territories that we're coming into, and you may qualify for funding that you don't realize that you will qualify for, and you may get something that your brothers or sisters they've never received before. So just make sure that that they're aware that there are some changes there. It's not as hard as it used to be. It's they've cut down on the questions. So though we have not had the opportunity yet to complete one, any of the four of us that are on the screen at this point, we've seen the questions and so forth that are out there. So it will be reasonably easier for those folks to complete. So just try to curtail that misconception out there that we're just not going to qualify, because you just don't know at this point whether you will or not. That's the biggest thing.
Would anyone else like to add to that? I know that was pretty comprehensive.
I just want to say everything that Bryson said is absolutely true. This is uncharted. And just to agree, we've done a little bit of research on our side on who will qualify based on like looking at this year's students, would they qualify or would they not qualify with the new need analysis and methodology. And there was a significant increase of students who appear that will be eligible for Pell next year. And with that, in the state of Kentucky, that also means you could be eligible for CAP. So you're not only possibly leaving Pell off the table, you're possibly leaving a state grant that could help as well. So that's really important. And even in these unprecedented times, I would always encourage, if you had a sibling who did not qualify for anything through the FAFSA, to still go ahead and submit it based on some of the other things that we have talked about, the institutional scholarships, the work study. Those things could change from year to year. Or there could be new scholarships, new donors out there who decide they want to offer something that your sibling who was there before didn't qualify for. So it's always a good idea to encourage that.
And the last thing I would like to add is that it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to try.
I would encourage everyone to fill out a FAFSA, even if they think or they know they're not going to be in the Pell Grant range. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be eligible for the Kentucky Tuition Grant through KIA, which is that private college grant through the state. So we often have students that do not get the Pell Grant or the CAP grant, but they do qualify for KTG, and that this year is $3,300. So for private colleges, it's very important that we have that FAFSA to be able to award the KTG grant. And also, we're using 2-year-old tax returns for the FAFSA. So for the 24-25 FAFSA, you're using 2022 taxes. And a lot of people will communicate with us, well, that's not accurate data, but you have to put accurate data. Let me back up. That's not accurate for our situation right now, but the FAFSA asks for 2022 taxes, and that's what you have to provide on there. And then there's a process called professional judgment or special circumstances now, or unusual circumstances that we can look at. But the baseline has to be 2022 tax returns. Then we can have a discussion of how is your situation now, and perhaps change elements on the FAFSA to do a professional judgment. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They don't think, oh, I need to fill out the FAFSA as it asked with 22 tax returns and then go forward with the special circumstance.
And that's something that even I had to do back when I was a student. It was a different process because Georgetown kind of had to, do it themselves. But they pulled taxes from like a moment when my dad was doing real estate, and but 2 years later, he was no longer a real estate agent. That income looked very different. And yeah, so it's just that also to know that it's formidable in a way, and like it's kind of there to best serve the student, and that there are ways to kind of figure those things out. For my next question, I'd like to start with Audrey. What is your best advice for low to no cost higher education?
My advice would be that financial aid and the out-of-pocket cost or no out-of-pocket cost is one piece of the puzzle, but not the end-all be-all. I don't encourage students to just go to the cheapest school or the no out-of-pocket cost, because it is a whole process to just get yourself to college, and they start in August in application days, and then it just is a domino effect of things that they have to do to get to where they want to be. But if at move-in day they've chosen a school just because it was out of pocket, zero out of pocket cost, but they don't like where they are, they don't feel like that's the college, that the best program for them or the best location for them, or there's a whole lot of decisions that go into where are you going to go when you start college. And I don't recommend just going with, oh, you don't have anything out of pocket, so just go here and then transfer later. A lot of students will start at one school because of the financial situation, but then quickly learn this isn't the place for me, this isn't the program that I want. So when they transfer, they're considered a transfer student, and they no longer have that really great incoming freshman scholarship offer. Sometimes it's chopped in half. So if we're going to offer $15,000 to you as a freshman and you transfer to us, we could be offering $10,000 instead of the 15, or even lower. So my recommendation is tour every college you think you might be interested in, starting as early as freshman year of high school, and then narrow that search down your junior year. Visit and revisit those schools as a senior. That way you're in the right program as of right then. We know things change. We know the minds change of our students, but financial aid is a piece of the puzzle, and the out-of-pocket cost is one big decision for a lot of parents, but don't let it be the end-all be-all decision of where you're going to go to college.
Would anybody else like to share their perspective? I know we have a bunch of different types of campuses represented here.
I would, for low cost, I'm just going to plug in KCTCS is a great resource for students to become Gen Ed certified. You can come for 2 years, and we're, the lowest tuition in the state, become Gen Ed certified. Then all of our credits do transfer to our 4-year public universities anyway. And I'm pretty sure that all of our universities in Kentucky is what I'm assuming now. So it's a great way to save money on that 4-year education. We're a great value. Lindsay, we can agree to that. It's a great way to get your feet wet, get started into college, and to move on and complete your 4-year degree. Also, I would encourage students to realize, and probably as advisors, to encourage students to remember that financial aid is not one time. They have to reapply every year. That not only does that mean with the FAFSAs, but they're going to need to do those scholarship searches every year, such as Bryson mentioned with NELNET, or the KIA scholarship searches, because those scholarships, some of them you have to reapply for every year. And once you get into your 4-year program, you may realize, hey, there's a scholarship out there that's given to someone in this major that's an outside of the college, and it may be only $200, but you get several $200 scholarships and stack those. You have quite a bit of money. So stacking small, don't ignore an award because it's only $200, because that's $200 that you've saved that you put towards your education to lower that cost. That would be my advice to students.
Yes, and just to kind of piggyback off of what both Audrey and Renan have said, with Audrey, you know, yes, look at all the schools you think you might be interested in. There is a place on the FAFSA where you can list, I think it's increased with the 24-25. So you can put, I think Audrey, you said 20 schools up on the FAFSA to see what those aid packages come back as. It doesn't hurt to try and see what's out there and see what works best financially for you and your family. And then to piggyback off Renan a little bit, yes, the community college here at KCTCS, we do offer the lowest prices in the state of Kentucky, but also a lot of great transfer out programs. I know, you know, Bluegrass has a connection with UK. We have a connection with some of the schools in the Louisville area, U of L, Bellarmine, and Spalding, and they offer some financial incentives once you transfer from KCTCS into their 4-year universities after you've completed your associate's degree. So that is another option to keep in mind and do your research on to see if you can consider some low cost options for the full 4 years.
And I will echo what Renan said. It is every year that you have to apply for that FAFSA and those scholarships. I rejoice this fall because I'm in like my last year of doctoral studies, and so like that was my last time having to fill out that FAFSA for myself, and that was like, you know, 10-ish years. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing, and the more familiar and comfortable you get with it, the better your student will certainly be. Bryson, do you have anything to add to that question from the 4-year public perspective?
You know, one thing that I see that students struggle a little bit with is looking at the, you know, what resources that they're receiving from other schools. And they may be receiving a $20,000 scholarship from one institution, but they're out of pocket there, or the additional funds that they're going to have to come up with through FAFSA, through other resources, maybe an additional $25,000. Whereas they may receive an offer of a $7,500 scholarship at another institution and only owe $2,000 when you're looking at the cost of tuition. So helping our students understand that just looking at the dollar value of what's presented to them is not always what they need to be making their decisions on. They need to be looking at the end result and look at that net cost. And there's a lot of information out there about each one of our schools, about the net cost and so forth, and who has great values. And that's the thing here in the state. I don't think there's any place that doesn't offer a great value for what we're getting from them. So we just want to make sure that students understand that they can't just look at and get excited about that dollar figure that they see. They need to dig a little bit deeper and take it next step and compare those schools.
Yeah, that's great advice. And even that out of pocket, because like I know sometimes the out of pocket might seem low, but it's like, well, you need to multiply that by like 2 or 4 years at least, depending upon like what institution you're looking at. It's not just that like one shot. So I'd like to ask one more question, and to kind of, I guess, wrap it all up, or I guess echo some of what maybe has already been said. But do you have any advice just in general for those in post-secondary advising roles or our counselors, and especially for those who encounter the students struggling to pay even after they've received some scholarships, grants, or financial aid?
I'll just chime in real quick. I just wanted, again, you know, we've talked about the FAFSA a lot. Don't encourage that, but at the same time, do not be afraid to reach out to colleges and universities, their financial aid offices. Even if the student doesn't end up going there, we are always more than happy to answer any questions for the student. And you can stop by, you can give us a call, you can send us an email, and we're here to help. And not just in the financial aid offices, but if you got in touch with admissions or you got in touch with the student affairs or whoever, they would be willing to help. And I know some students especially feel intimidated by doing that. And as a person working with those students, please encourage them not to feel that way, because we are all here to help and want to help. So that's what I would add on to that one.
Another thing that we need to not forget, aside from just our financial aid offices, and of course, Brian is here with us today from WKU's EOC area, our Educational Opportunity Center, through our TRIO programs. Any of those programs typically have an area where that they're going to go out and actually help folks complete the FAFSA. So if you need help, there's more than just the university resources here as far as financial aid offices. If you're working with setting up a FAFSA completion event, KIA has folks that will come in and help you with that. I know WKU's EOC will be glad to help with that here in the region, and then your financial aid offices as well. So there's more than just us out there doing this work, and that's something we need to not forget, because it takes all of us in this game.
I would like to add something related to the cost we talked about earlier, and advisors to remember to share this with students. It's not just the cost of tuition or living in the dorms. Encourage students and parents to sit down and think about how much is it going to cost for me to get my son or daughter to and from school. Because I promise you, Western is going to send them back to the parent at some point in that semester. So they're going to need to figure out a way on how to get home and how much is that going to cost. And if they're thinking of going out of state, hey, that's a plane ticket. You know, it could be in those situations. So think about those costs that are not, we don't necessarily always think about. I know in my orientation with parents, I tell them, you got to sit down and do a budget with your student and be realistic, because when they come talk to me, they're going to need to have some deodorant and some shampoo. You know, who's going to pay for those things? And hey, ladies, we need our glam. Who's going to get your nails done? I know Bryson talked about my glam a lot, but you know, I got to get my hair done, got to get my nails done. How are you going to pay for those things? So those are all costs that are associated with the student going to school and living for 1 year, because they are a person too, and they have to live. So just when we're thinking of aid packages, we do consider those things in the aid package, but what we look at and we seem to concentrate more on is that tuition, because yes, the institution needs to be paid, and if they're living on campus, that dorm life, but there are more things associated to those costs, and that students and parents need to be mindful of.
The last thing
The budget is such a oh, sorry, Audrey, go ahead.
I would just encourage everyone that's advising or counseling students to help lead them to whatever event, whatever college event is going on in the area. Any kind of opportunity that you can help orchestrate for them to get the most exposure to the college representative, the college fairs. Encourage, you know, individual college tours, but also try to take groups on college campuses if you can, if there's a grant or something out there, to expose students to the colleges that they're applying to. Again, it's a really long process for a whole senior year just to get to college, and then for them not to enjoy or stay where they've decided to go. So any kind of, even setting up video chats with the college counselors or through admissions, or even financial aid. If a student can't travel here, but I'm willing to do a video chat with them and talk with the parents after hours. We'll do whatever needs to be done in order to make them feel comfortable with their decisions, but encourage them to get plugged in, announce every lunch, you know, every lunch table that has a college rep sitting at it, announce those days, announce the college fairs, and help promote this, being proactive about getting that information to the students.
All of that is really great. We had someone pop in the chat that says, please encourage colleges to offer high school summer enrichment programs and great exposure for college, to college for high school students. So yeah, anytime you can take advantage of like that, you know, connection and activity. We have Brian in the chat. The WKU trio serve many counties in South Central Kentucky. And they have a team of academic counselors ready and willing to help high school students, adults, and veterans enroll in college. So yeah, And that's truly is a lot of it, and why we like, why the KAA exists and why we host these webinars is just making sure that um, those advisors and all of us, kind of in the room, in the virtual room, I guess today, um, have access and know about those resources that are out there, because like people do have questions, and typically I've found almost 100% of the time someone is there, able and ready and willing and excited to answer that question. So it's just a matter of knowing kind of where to look. So at this time, we have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions for our panel members, I'd like to say thank you first. And if you would just like to, you can use your little emoji to raise a hand, or you can pop any questions you might have in the chat, or you can just come off mute and ask your question. Either one of those options works. Click through and see. I feel like this was pretty comprehensive, so we might not have any questions.
I want to thank you all for the great information that you shared. I know there may be some questions, but I learned a lot. And as a parent of a senior, this is helpful to me too. So appreciate that. I think we do have a question from Emily.
Hi, so it's kind of that hot seat question that I think a lot of us get from kind of our middle to upper class parents who really don't qualify for like a lot of aid and sort of are frustrated, but they also can't just like bankroll their students' entire college. So, and I'm sure you guys get in those situations too. I guess, how do you respond in that case where you've got, a parent or student who's upset about not really qualifying for a lot of need-based stuff, but then also saying, or like, some way of students saying, but my parents aren't helping me pay for college, they're making me pay for college, like those kinds of things. So I'm just curious how you all navigate that kind of hot seat conversation that I think we all get into from time to time.
Well, here at Western, when I'm faced with those questions, and I think all four of us will get those at times. Typically, our institutions are investing in that student's future because we're giving that student some form of scholarship. Typically, if their academics merit that and so forth. So I kind of base the conversation around that. We're investing in your future so that you can pursue a 4-year education. And it may take some investment from the student or possibly from the parents to assist with that. I know it's frustrating, and you just have to come down to that, because they pay taxes just like everyone else. And it's frustrating that those resources may not be there that they had hoped for. We do try to, as we've talked about, professional judgment, doing those PJs and trying to work through if anything has changed with finances to make sure that there's not any stone that's left unturned for those students. We always direct them then to scholarship resources, but we do also then go on ahead and let the student know that student loans, if they are used appropriately and reasonably, are not a bad thing. Student loans have gotten a lot of bad kickback in the last few years, and we hear the horror stories of those. But unfortunately, what you see though is not necessarily what led up to that. And if you hear of those people that say they owe $150,000, $200,000 in student loans and they can't pay their payments, what led to that? Because say here at WKU, the average student loan that a student leaves here after a 4-year degree is $26,000. So that, when you break that down over a 10-year period, is a very reasonable loan payment each month for that student. That's doable. They can still have a car, they can still have a home, they can have a life, they can manage with that if they borrow responsibly. So that's kind of one of the things that I always try to walk them through, to make sure that there's nothing else that we can do but then we're investing in you, and it may take some of that investment. And, even our provost here at the institution has made the comment that the best investment that he ever made was when he had to borrow a little money to be able to finish up a degree, and he's now the provost of this institution. So, it didn't necessarily hurt him and keep him from his goals. He did it correctly, and it's up to us to help the students use those resources correctly.
We had a question in the chat that do students with professional judgment issues approach someone in financial aid at the college to initiate the process? And I responded that, like, when I was a student, yes, I had to tell them that my situation had changed and I needed more aid. And then that's when they initiated the professional judgment process. Is that still kind of how that would work, or has it changed?
That is still the case, but I would encourage them, if the student has applied at several colleges, they will need to work with each college that they've applied with, because everyone's process can be and usually is a little bit different.
And I would note that just because, let's say WKU approved the professional judgment doesn't mean that we will here. So every college has the ability to approve it or deny it. The calculations of how we come up with the changes may be different as well. So it's not one size fits all. Again, like Renan said, if your student has applied to 4 colleges and you want a professional judgment done at all 4 colleges, we all probably have different deadlines as to when we need paperwork in to perform the professional judgment. I will just leave it at that. We will all evaluate it. It is a professional judgment. So once it's completed, it can't be changed by the department. It cannot be challenged again. It cannot be appealed. Our decision is our decision. And every year, keep in mind, the FAFSA, asks for a different tax year. So every year, you can't have the same situation coming up to do a PJ every single year as well. So, but yes, I encourage any student that has something that made their financial situation different, whether it's medical issues, medical bills, a disaster, or just income changes, to go straight to a financial aid administrator. Don't confide in other people, because we're the ones making the decisions and we know exactly what we have to collect to be compliant. So there's forms and processes to that.
That's one of the things I was going to follow up and ask, is that to remember it's like a yearly thing, because I didn't need a professional judgment my freshman year, but I did my sophomore and junior, and then it was able to be like back to normal my senior year, because that 2 years back reflected the actual situation. So just keep in mind that it yeah, it's different for every institution. Well, I don't see any more hands up, and I don't see any more questions popping up in the chat. So I will say thank you, Bryson, Audrey, Renan, and Lindsay, for being here today, and that such thoughtful discussion and answering all of our questions that we kind of put you on the spot for as it pertains to financial aid and helping our students. I'd like to take a moment now as we kind of wrap up to share KAA's college and career advising toolkit. Actually not our toolkit, our webinar. I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. So we have our October webinar next month. It is creating partnerships for early career awareness. And so just like this webinar, you'll be able to join us for 1 hour. If you'd like to register for that, you can register with the QR code on the screen or at our website, cpe.ky.gov/advisingkentucky. And our registration and any information that you ever need about KAA can be found there or on our toolkit, which I will be sharing with us next. So this is our college and career advising toolkit. This can be accessed by using the URL on your screen or the QR code. And this is an online resource we launched in the spring to support all post-secondary advising systems and offer a comprehensive collection of tools, information, and resources to serve as a hub for advisors all across the Commonwealth. And advisors can use this toolkit to gain more insight into topics such as career and academic advising, student development, and more. So each topic housed in our toolkit offers quick guide documents, and those quick guide documents can be downloaded and easily shared with other practitioners, students, or even family members. They're housed in our toolkit as PDFs. And so we hope that you take advantage of all that has to offer. As I mentioned earlier, registration is still open for our 2023 Fall Professional Learning event. We just had our event in Lexington yesterday at BCTC, the Leestown campus, and our next offering is next week at Sky CTC in Bowling Green. And the focus is on using data to support post-secondary advising. And through reflection and discussion, we will look at how data can inform your advising practices to work and build a more robust advising system within your school and district. Participants will have the opportunity to learn from district teams who have made a commitment to improving their post-secondary advising systems as they share how they have navigated the achievements and challenges of implementing new advising systems and practices. As always, we encourage you to bring colleagues who are part of your post-secondary advising systems, school counselors, administrators, Frisky coordinators, community partners, and any others who are in your circle. And ELIN Frisky training credit is also available for this event. So if you'd like to join us for that, feel free to use the QR code or check out cpe.ky.gov/advising-toolkit. To stay connected with KAA, you can always find up-to-date information on our website. And all of this is also being sent in the chat for you to access, where you can subscribe to our communications, including updates about podcasts, webinars, as well as our informational emails and in-person events. You can also follow us on our social media accounts at Advising Kentucky. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And we often share about upcoming events and advising information on those channels as well. Last but not least, we're also on YouTube, and you can also find our past webinars on our toolkit. Last but not least, we ask that you complete our survey as a way for us to continue to improve the Kentucky Advising Academy and our offerings. This is also how we'll process your ELA credit, so if you need that, please scan the QR code or use the link on the screen to complete this form, and the link is also being added in the chat to complete this. And we'll use this as a way for us to keep improving the Kentucky Advising Academy. And we appreciate your feedback and evaluation. And this is also how we'll know where to email your certificate for participation today. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our guest panelists for providing such thoughtful discussion and information about the financial aid process so we can help our students thrive and survive in college even more. And we hope to see you all at future events. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.